Good evening, brothers and sisters. This is Dr. Makemba. We invite you once again to join us on this platform. Engage us on this platform once again as we discuss a wonderful and an interesting subject matter in our pursuit of wisdom. Today we'll be talking about a very interesting subject matter. We're going to be talking about love. We will be looking at what love is. We'll be addressing some misconception surrounding love, and we will go about talking about the importance of understanding love in its right context. Let me start off by giving you a common dictionary definition of what many think love is. To an extent perhaps, but not probably entirely. Love is often described as this intense feeling of a deep affection, nearness, warmth, closeness or attachment to an individual or to something. Meaning that individual, they describe those feelings as being love. Maybe they are closely attached to somebody, their wife, their girlfriend, or they even probably love something like sport, and they're in love with sport, and they think that is all to it what love is all about. But there is actually more to love than that. And this is what we want to look at today. And if the world was to understand love in its context and in what it really is, it would have been a better place today. A lot of what we often refer to as love is often infatuation, and it has really nothing to do with love, because love is really more than a feeling. Now, let's first and foremost look at the aspects of what love really is. Over and above the feeling of being closely attached to an individual or to something, there is more to love than just a mere feeling of being attached to somebody. Love in its context is, more than a feeling, first and foremost. Love is basically a decision that one has to make on a daily basis. In other words, you have to love even when you don't feel like. Then you really begin to understand what love really is all about. Because the actual act of love would entail, being patient, being kind, forgiving, not being boastful. Love does not show off. Love is not easily angered. Love does not keep the record of wrong. Love is not rude. Love is not self-seeking. Love is not easily angered. Now, that is what love really is all about. And of course, God in His love for us, He created us, and He has not left us to wander off without direction on this planet. He has given us His word, and this is where we study and understand what love is. And that description that I've just spoken about of love now is actually found in the Bible in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 4 to 5. Now, going further down, let's discuss some aspects that normally we get wrong in our interpretation of what love is, and in our attempt to execute this thing called love. Let's look at the context of a relationship. Let's say it's husband and a wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, for instance. Now, if you're in a relationship, heterosexual relationship that is, and you really understand what love is, meaning that you do not keep account of wrongdoings, you are not easily angered, you are not envious or jealous of your partner, you are not self-seeking, you are not boastful, you are not proudful. In other words, you are able now to develop a character that is able to accommodate the next person. You are able to conduct yourself in a way that, whoever you are involved with, they will always look forward to be in your presence. Why? Because, you got this energy with you that sort of pulls them close. They feel lifted up when they're in your presence. You become dependable. You become trustworthy when you have that character. They're able to open up to you knowing that you have their best interest at heart. And whatever they open up to you, you're not going to make it public knowledge and use it against them. That's what love is really all about. But now let's compare that to the other end where people miss the mark thinking is love. If you base your understanding of love on mere feelings only, what happens oftentimes is that the day you don't feel like you are in love, then you have a problem in your relationship. Because if your love is merely based on feeling, the day you don't feel like you're in love, then you create tension in your home, tension in your relationship. Because there will be days when you don't feel like being around people. And if you are merely an individual that makes decisions based on feeling, guess what? On that particular day when you don't feel like being around people, you become mean to everybody. You don't want anybody around you. You don't even want to communicate nor speak to anybody. Why? Because you are acting out on your feeling. But if you have a proper understanding and a placing of love, what you feel does not necessarily influence how you conduct yourself, because you have a better understanding. So that then, brings us to the point that, oftentimes love is a function of your thinking. However much we sometimes get those goosebumps and those, feel good, feelings down in our soul, in our heart, love is really more than a feeling. And it's about time we now walk in love. Let's look at love from a leadership perspective. Let's say you are leading an organization, a corporation. Let's say you are president of a nation. Let's say you are leading, a group of people. For you to be an effective leader, you need to walk in love. If you see, for instance, a leader that loves the people he's leading, let's take a president of a nation, for example. When you are a president of a nation and you are leading a nation and you are walking in love, it influences all your decision-making processes. If you love your people, you won't sell them out. If you love your people, you will not put your own personal interest first at the expense of the interest of the nation. If you are a leader and you are walking in love, you will always do what is in the best interest of those that you are leading. The problem comes when individuals become selfish. They just think about themselves. They are less bothered as to what the next person is going through. And that trickle down into their decision-making processes. And then they end up wreaking havoc throughout the entire nation. Especially in Africa, our leaders need to start loving their people. Lead the nation from the position of love and not be in the position of power and push your personal agendas. That's another example of how one can sort of, bring love into a play in a position of leadership. Let's just talk about, just love for humanity, for instance. If us human beings learn to walk in love, there will not be anybody going to bed hungry today. The inequality, the poverty that we often see wrecking nations, especially in Africa, is by far because we lack the love for one another. We are very selfish, and selfishness plays out in our decision-making processes. And then we have uneven distribution of resources. Individuals that, have the credentials that qualifies to do certain things, to be awarded certain, projects, to be given certain position based on credentials are often overlooked. And then, work is given to people that lack the know-how, and they end up destroying everything. Why? Because people lack love. People are just pushing their own selfish, personal agendas. If you look, for instance, at a nation like Singapore, Singapore was a third world country at some stage. Malaysia had at some stage suggested to Singapore to say, look, we buy you as an island, we add you to our collection of islands. But the leaders of Singapore loved their nation. They loved their people. And they did something very fascinating. They undertook a project where they just determined to hire the best based on credentials. So they gave responsibility to people with track record, people that are known to have, achieved something. And this was done because this individual loved their nation and they wanted to build up their nation. Singapore today is known as one of the first world countries. Now, sometimes you look to Africa, for instance, and you ask yourself, where is the love in our leaders? Why can't we do the same thing in Africa? Why don't we award, the deserving individuals with credentials? Why don't we give them the responsibility to take care of certain things that we want to achieve in our countries? Because, if you give somebody a responsibility and they lack the skills, they lack the know-how, guess what? It will cost you more, because you will award this individual their responsibility. This individual will probably or most likely is going to hire another individual to take care of what they are supposed to take care of. You know why? Because they do not know they don't have the skills. So you end up paying more to get the job done, instead of just giving it and awarding it to the person that has the skills and the know-how. But you know why we do this? It's because we lack the love. We don't understand what love is. And we do not do things out of love. Our motives is not love. If our motive was love, and if our motive is love, we would always think about, what is in the best interest of everybody. And when we approach life like that, guess what? We are able to produce better results. Countries, they mess up their health systems, they mess up their education systems because of selfish personal interest. And if you investigate most of the African countries, they have gained independence, they have seemingly done well over a period of time. But as time goes by, leaders become selfish. They hang into power for longer than they are supposed to. Leaders, they grow older. And of course, when you grow older, you are no longer the same. Your value systems change. The system in which you are operating change, and it's changing all the time. If you were 20 8 years ago, 8 years ago, you're probably effective as a young person. To try and do something 100 years later, at 100, that really has to take a 20-year-old to accomplish, you will be lying to yourself. You're basically, functioning in a place that, physically and biologically, you don't have the capacity to. You don't think the same way when you're old. So, but all of this has to emanate from this place called love. Do we really love each other as people? Do leaders of nations, especially in Africa, really love their people? It's very hard to hear, for instance, in Africa, a prime minister or a president have resigned willingly because he has now realized that he has done what he's supposed to do and whatever is left to do is out of his reach. We won't hear that. Instead, what you hear is you will find presidents in Africa as old as 80 plus years hanging on to power, even when their physical health does not permit them to do so. Why? Because there's no love, And there's a saying that what we often refer to as common sense is actually rare sense in most cases, especially in Africa. In Africa, I always say that the flower called common sense is very expensive, and we don't have that seed in Africa. It doesn't always grow in Africa. It's very rare that you find people applying common sense, and oftentimes it's because they lack the love. So it's time we go back, look into our heart, ask ourselves, what do we do every day? What are we doing every day? And if we are doing what we are doing, are we really doing it out of love? Or is it motivated by something else? This is your brother, Dr. Makemba. I just want to say, let's love each other. Let's learn to understand what really love is. And let's walk in love every day and build our nation up. Till we meet again.